Henry and Gordon were lonely when Thomas left the yard to run his branch line. They missed him very much. They had more work to do and had to fetch their own coaches. The big engines thought they were too important to fetch coaches. James grumbled too. "We get no rest, we get no rest," they all complained. But the coaches only laughed. "You're lazy and slack, you're lazy and slack," they answered. Altogether, the engines were causing Sir Topham Hatt a great deal of trouble. The big stations at both ends of the line each have a turntable. Sir Topham Hatt had made them so that the tender engines can be turned around because it is dangerous for them to go fast backwards. Little tank engines like Thomas don't need turntables. They can go just as well backwards as forwards. But to hear Gordon talk, you would have thought that Sir Topham Hatt had given him a tender just to show how important he was. "You don't understand, little Thomas. We tender engines have a position to keep up. It doesn't matter where you go, but we are important. And for Sir Topham Hatt to make us do shunting, fetch coaches, and go on some of those dirty sidings, it's not the proper thing." Thomas chuckled and went off with Annie and Clarabel. "Disgraceful," Gordon hissed as he ran backwards to the turntable. The turntable was in a windy place close to the sea, and if he was not on it just right, he put it out of balance and made it difficult to turn. Today, Gordon was in a bad temper, and the wind was blowing fiercely. His driver tried to make him stop in the right place, but Gordon wasn't trying. The fireman tried to turn the handle, but Gordon's weight and the strong wind prevented him. "It's no good," they said at last. "Your big tender upsets the balance. If you were a little tank engine, you'd be all right. Now you'll have to pull the next train backwards." "Look," called some boys, "there's a new tank engine." "Oh, it's only Gordon back to front." "Hello," called Thomas, "playing tank engines? Sensible engine. Take my advice, scrap your tender and have a nice bunker." Gordon said nothing. Even James laughed when he saw him. "Take care," hissed Gordon, "you might stick too." "No fear," chuckled James, "I'm not so fat as you." "I mustn't stick," thought James. He stopped on just the right place to balance the table. It could now swing easily. Gordon arrived in time to see everything. James turned much too easily. The wind puffed him round like a top. He couldn't stop. "Well, well," said Gordon, "are you playing roundabouts?" Poor James, feeling quite giddy, rolled off to the shed without a word. That night, the three engines had an indignation meeting. "It's shameful to treat tender engines like this. Gordon has to go backwards and people think he's a tank engine. James spins round like a top and everyone laughs at us. And to add to that, Sir Topham Hatt makes us all shunt in dirty sidings. Blech!" "Listen," said Gordon. He whispered something to the others. "We'll do it tomorrow. Sir Topham Hatt will look silly." The engines have decided to go on strike. Sir Topham Hatt sat in his office listening to the noise outside. The passengers were angry. The station master came in. "There's trouble in the shed, sir. Henry is sulking, there's no train, and the passengers are saying this is a bad railway." "Indeed," said Sir Topham Hatt, "we cannot allow that." He found Gordon, James, and Henry looking very cross. "Come along, Henry, it's time your train was ready." "Henry's not going," said Gordon. "We won't shunt like little tank engines. That was Thomas's job. We are important tender engines. You fetch our coaches and we will pull them. Tender engines don't shunt." "We'll see about that," said Sir Topham Hatt. "No engine on my railway is too important for small jobs." And he hurried away to find Edward. The yard has never been the same since Thomas left to run his branch line, he thought sadly. Edward was shunting. "Leave those freight cars, please, Edward," said Sir Topham Hatt. "I want you to push coaches for me in the yard." "Thank you, sir, that will be a nice change." "That's a good engine, off you go then." So Edward found coaches for the 3 engines, and that day the trains ran as usual. But next morning Edward looked unhappy. Gordon came clanking past, hissing rudely. "Bless me," said Sir Topham Hatt, "what a noise!" "They all hiss me, sir," answered Edward. "They say tender engines don't shunt, and last night they said I have grey wheels. I haven't, have I, sir?" "No, Edward, you have nice blue ones, and I'm proud of you. Tender engines do shunt. But all the same, we do need another tank engine here." He went to a workshop, and they showed him all sorts of engines. At last he saw a smart little green engine with 4 wheels. "That's the one," he thought. "If I choose you, will you work hard?" "Oh, sir, yes, sir." "That's a good engine. I'll call you Percy." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir," said Percy. And Sir Topham Hatt brought him back to the yard. "Edward," he called, "here's Percy. Will you show him everything?" Percy soon learned what he had to do, and they had a happy afternoon. Then Henry came by, hissing as usual. "Chee!" went Percy. Henry jumped and ran back to the shed. "How beautifully you wheezed him," laughed Edward. "I can't wheeze like that." "Oh," said Percy, "that's nothing. You should hear them in the workshop. You have to wheeze loudly to make yourself heard." Next morning, Thomas arrived. "Sir Topham Hatt sent for me. I expect he wants help," he said to Edward. "Shh, shh. Here he comes," replied Edward. "Well done, Thomas. You've been quick. Listen, Henry, Gordon, and James are sulking. They say they won't shunt like little tank engines. So I have shut them up, and I want you both to run the line for a while." "Little tank engines, indeed," snorted Thomas. "We'll show them." "And Percy will help too." "Oh, sir, yes, sir. Please, sir," answered Percy. Edward and Thomas worked the main line, greeting each other as they passed by. Percy puffed along the branch line. Thomas was anxious about Annie and Clarabel, but both driver and conductor promised to take care of them. There were fewer trains, but the passengers didn't mind. They knew the 3 other engines were having a lesson. Gordon, James, and Henry were cold, lonely, and miserable. They wished now they hadn't been so silly. Henry, James, and Gordon were miserable. They had been shut up for several days for being naughty and longed to be let out again. At last Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "I hope you are sorry," he said, "and understand that every job on the railway is important. We have a new tank engine called Percy, who helps pull coaches, and Thomas and Edward have worked the main line nicely. But I will let you out now if you promise to work hard." "Yes, sir," said the three engines, "we will." "That's right, but please remember that this no shunting nonsense must stop." He then told Percy, Edward, and Thomas that they could go and play on the branch line for a few days. And they ran off happily to find Annie and Clarabelle at the junction. The two coaches were so pleased to see Thomas again. Edward and Percy played with freight cars. "Stop, stop, stop," screamed the cars as they were pushed into their proper sidings. But the two engines laughed and went on shunting till the cars were tidily arranged. Next, Edward took some empty cars to the quarry. Percy was left alone. He didn't mind that a bit. He liked watching trains and being cheeky to the other engines. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he would call, and they got very cross. After a great deal of shunting, Percy was waiting for the signalman to set the switch so that he could get back to the yard. He was eager to work, but was being rather careless and not paying attention. Edward had warned Percy, "Be careful on the main line. Whistle to the signalman you are there." But Percy didn't remember to whistle, so the busy signalman forgot him. Percy waited and waited. The switch was still against him, so he couldn't move. Then he looked along the main line. "Peep, peep!" He whistled in horror, for rushing straight towards him was Gordon with the express. "Oh!" groaned Gordon. "Get out of my way!" Percy opened his eyes. Gordon had stopped with Percy's buffers a few inches from his own. But Percy had begun to move. "I won't stay here. I'll run away," he puffed. He went straight through Edward's station and was so frightened that he ran right up Gordon's hill without stopping. After that, he was tired, but he couldn't stop. He had no driver to shut off steam and apply the brakes. "I want to stop, I want to stop," he puffed. The man in the signal box saw Percy was in trouble, so he kindly set the switch. Percy puffed wearily onto a nice empty siding, ending in a big bank of earth. He was too tired now to care where he went. "I want to stop. I want to stop. I have stopped," he puffed thankfully. "Never mind, Percy," said the workman as they dug him out. "You shall have a drink and some coal, and then you'll feel better." Presently, Gordon arrived. "Well done, Percy. You started so quickly that you stopped a nasty accident." "I'm sorry I was cheeky," said Percy. "You were clever to stop." Then Gordon helped pull Percy out from the bank. The two engines are now good friends, but Percy is always most careful when he goes on the main line. One morning, Henry was feeling very sorry for himself. Sometimes he could pull trains, but sometimes he felt he had no strength at all. I suffered dreadfully, and no one cares. Rubbish, Henry, snorted James. You don't work hard enough. Sir Topham Hatt spoke to him too. What's wrong with you, Henry? You have had lots of new parts and new paint too, but they've done you no good. If we can't make you better, we must get another engine instead of you to do the work. This made Henry, his driver and his fireman very sad. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting when Henry came to the platform. He had taken off his hat and coat and put on overalls. Henry managed to start, but his fireman was not satisfied. Henry is a bad steamer, he said to Sir Topham Hatt. I build up his fire, but it doesn't give enough heat. Henry tried very hard, but it was no good. He didn't have enough steam and came to a stop outside Edward's station. Oh dear, thought Henry, I shall have to go away. Oh dear, oh dear. All he could do was to go slowly onto a siding, and Edward took charge of the train. Sir Topham Hatt and the fireman went on discussing Henry's troubles. What do you think is wrong, fireman? Asked Sir Topham Hatt. Excuse me, sir, he answered, but the fact is the coal is wrong. We've had a poor lot lately, and today it's worse. The other engines can manage, they have big fireboxes. Henry's is small and can't make the heat. With Welsh coal, he'd be a different engine. It's expensive, said Sir Topham Hatt, but Henry must have a fair chance. James shall go and fetch some. When the Welsh coal came, Henry's driver and fireman were excited. Now we'll show them, Henry, old fellow. They carefully made his fire, putting large lumps of coal like a wall round the outside. Then the glowing middle part was covered with smaller lumps. You're spoiling my fire, complained Henry. Wait and see, said the fireman. We'll have a roaring fire, just when we want it. The fireman was right. When Henry reached the platform, the water was boiling nicely, and he had to let off steam. How are you, Henry? Peep, peep, whistled Henry. I feel fine. Have you a good fire, driver? Never better, sir, and plenty of steam. No record breaking, warned Sir Topham Hatt. Don't push him too hard. Henry won't need pushing, sir. I'll have to hold him back. Lovely day. He had never felt so well in his life. He wanted to go fast, but his driver wouldn't let him. Steady, old fellow, he would say. There's plenty of time. They arrived early at the station. Thomas puffed in. Where have you been, lazybones? Asked Henry. Oh, I can't wait for dawdling tank engines like you. Goodbye. Whoosh, said Thomas to Annie and Clarabel. Have you ever seen anything like it? Both Annie and Clarabel agreed that they never had. One winter evening, Henry's driver said, "We'll be out early tomorrow. We've got to take the Flying Kipper." "Don't tell Gordon, but I think if we pull the Kipper nicely, Sir Topham Hatt will let us pull the Express. The special coal they gave you is working well." "Hurrah!" cried Henry. "That will be lovely." All kinds of ships use the harbour at the big station by the sea. There are passenger ships, cargo ships, and fishing boats also come here. They unload their fish on the quay. Some of it goes to shops in the town, and the rest in a special train to other places far away. This is the train the railwaymen call the Flying Kipper. Henry was ready at 5 o'clock. There was snow and frost. Men hustled and shouted, loading up the crates of fish. The last door banged, the guard showed his green lamp. The Flying Kipper was ready to go. Come on, don't be silly, puffed Henry to the freight cars. The cars shuddered and groaned, trot, trick, all right. That is better, puffed Henry. Clouds of smoke and steam poured from his funnel into the cold air, and the fire's light shone brightly. Hurry, panted Henry. They were going well. The light grew better. The signal light shone green as they passed. Then a yellow signal appeared ahead. His driver prepared to stop, but the home signal was down. "All clear, Henry. Away we go." They couldn't know the switches from the main line to a siding were frozen, and the home signal should have been set at danger, but snow had forced it down. A freight train was waiting in the siding to let the Flying Kipper pass, and the driver and fireman were drinking cocoa in the caboose. "The Kipper is due," said the conductor. "Who cares?" said the fireman. "This is good cocoa." The driver got up. "Come on, fireman, back to our engine." They got out just in time. Henry's driver and fireman had jumped clear before the crash, but Henry lay dazed and surprised. Sir Topham Hatt came to see him. "The signal was down, sir," said Henry. "Cheer up, Henry, it wasn't your fault. Ice and snow caused the accident. I'm sending you to Crewe, a fine place for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox. You'll feel a different engine and won't need special coal anymore. Won't that be nice?" "Yes, sir," said Henry doubtfully. Henry liked being at Crewe, but was glad to come home. A crowd of people waited to see him arrive in his new shape. He looked so splendid and strong that they gave him 3 cheers. "Peep, peep," he whistled. "Thank you very much." I am sorry to say that a lot of little children are often late for school because they wait to see Henry go by. They often see him pulling the express. He does it so well that Gordon is jealous. But that's another story. Gordon was cross. Why should Henry have a new shape, he grumbled. A shape good enough for me is good enough for him. He goes gallivanting off to Crewe, leaving us to do his work, and comes back saying how happy he feels. It's disgraceful. And there's another thing. Henry whistles too much. No respectable engine ever whistles loudly at stations. It isn't wrong, but we just don't do it. Poor Henry didn't feel happy anymore. Never mind, whispered Percy. I'm glad you're home again. I like your whistling. Goodbye, Henry, called Gordon. We're glad to have you with us again, but remember what I said. Later, Henry stopped at Edward's station. Hello, Henry, said Edward. You look splendid. I was pleased to hear your happy whistle yesterday. Thank you, Edward, smiled Henry. Shh, shh. Can you hear something? It sounds like Gordon, said Edward, and it ought to be Gordon. But Gordon never whistles like that. It was Gordon. He came rushing down the hill at a tremendous rate. He didn't look at Henry, and he didn't look at Edward. He screamed straight through the station and disappeared. Well, said Edward. It isn't wrong, chuckled Henry, but we just don't do it. And he told Edward what Gordon had said. Meanwhile, Gordon screeched along the line. The noise was awful. At the station, everyone held their ears. Sir Topham Hatt held his ears too. Take him away, he bellowed, and stop that noise! Gordon puffed sadly away, but he wouldn't stop whistling until two fitters climbed up and knocked his whistle valve in place. That night, Gordon slunk into the shed. He was glad it was empty. It isn't wrong, murmured Henry to no one in particular, but we just don't do it. No one mentioned whistles. Next morning, Henry was enjoying himself enormously. I feel so well, he sang. Trickety-trot, hummed his coaches. Then he saw some boys on a bridge. Peep, peep, hello, he whistled. Oh, he called. The boys didn't wave and take his number. They thought it fun to drop stones on him instead. They've broken our glass! They've broken our glass! Sobbed the coaches. The passengers weren't hurt, but they were cross. Call the police! No, said the driver. Leave it to Henry and me. What will you do, they asked. Can you keep a secret? Yes, yes. Well then, said the driver. Henry is going to sneeze at those boys. Lots of people were waiting at the station just before the bridge. They wanted to see what would happen. Henry has plenty of ashes, said the driver. Please keep all windows shut till we have passed the bridge. Henry is as excited as we are, aren't you, old fellow? Henry was feeling stuffed up. Soon they could see the boys, and they all had stones. Are you ready, Henry, said his driver. Sneeze hard when I tell you. Now, he said. Achoo, shoo! Well done, Henry, laughed his driver. Henry went home very pleased with himself. He had taught Gordon and silly boys a lesson with a whistle and a sneeze. a tram engine. He has cow catchers and side plates and doesn't look like a steam engine at all. He takes freight cars from farms and villages to the main line and is cheerful to everyone he meets. He has a coach called Henrietta, who has seen better days. It's not fair at all, she grumbles, remembering she used to be full and 9 cars would rattle behind her. Now there are only 3 or 4, for the farms and factories send their goods mostly by truck. Toby is always careful. The cars, buses and trucks often have accidents. Toby hasn't had an accident for years. The buses are crowded and Henrietta is empty. A lady and a stout gentleman stood on Toby's platform. He was, of course, a Topham Hatt, but Toby didn't know this yet. "Come on, grandfather," cried the children. "Do look at this engine." "That's a tram engine, Stephen," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Is it electric?" asked Bridget. "Whoosh!" hissed Toby. "Shh!" said her brother. "You've offended him." "But trams are electric, aren't they?" "They are mostly, but this is a steam tram." "May we go in it, grandfather? Please?" "Stop," said Sir Topham Hatt to the conductor. They all scrambled into Henrietta. "Hip, hip, hooray!" chanted Henrietta. But Toby did not sing. "Electric indeed! Electric indeed!" he snorted. He was proud of being a steam train. "What is your name?" asked Sir Topham Hatt. "Toby, sir." "Thank you, Toby, for a very nice ride." "Thank you, sir," said Toby. He felt better now. This gentleman, he thought, is a gentleman who knows how to speak to engines. The children came every day for 2 weeks. Sometimes they rode with the conductor, sometimes in empty cars. On the last day of all, the driver invited them into his cab. All were sorry when they had to go away. And Sir Topham Hatt and his family thanked everyone. "Come again soon," replied Toby. We will," called the children. And they waved till Toby was out of sight. The months passed. Toby had few cars and fewer passengers. "Our last day, Toby," said his driver one morning. "The manager says we must close tomorrow." That day, everyone wanted the chance of a last ride. The passengers joked and sang, but Toby and his driver wished they wouldn't. "Goodbye, Toby," said the passengers afterwards. "We are sorry your line is closing down." "So am I," said Toby. Nobody wants me, Toby thought, and went unhappily to sleep. Next morning, the shed was flung open, and old Toby woke with a start to see his driver waving a piece of paper at him. "Wake up, Toby," they shouted excitedly. "The mail has just arrived, and there is a letter for us from the stout gentleman. Maybe it's good news."